Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we are going to be continuing on with our series on iOS development with UIKit by talking about auto layout. Now, what is auto layout? Well, auto layout is a technology that UIKit uses to be able to, lay out all of your views and app content. Now, how exactly does it lay out that content? Well, it uses what's called constraints. Constraints allow you to pin your views to each other, to the edge of the screen, or a safe area. And with these constraints, they can, depending on how you define them, they can adapt to landscape mode, portrait mode, other device sizes, all that kind of stuff. So if you configure your constraints properly, you can have a good looking user interface on all devices in all orientations, which is generally ideal. Now, the way you configure constraints is slightly confusing at first. I know I got slightly confused myself, but the biggest thing that you need to remember about constraints is that when you apply them, each view that they get applied to must have a width, a height, an X position, and a Y position. It has to know all four of those bits of information. Now, how you get that information to iOS in the auto layout system is entirely up to whatever circumstance you're in. However, there you have to make sure that you get that information to the auto layout system regardless. Now, let's take a look at a practical example of constraints being used. So on screen, you can see in my simulator, I have some text in the middle of our screen that says "Hello World." Now, you don't need to understand the you do not need to understand the UI code here for like configuring this text and all that stuff for now. We'll take a look at that in another video, and probably in a video or two. But let's go into Xcode. And let's take a look at the constraints. How we can, if we look at our view controller, you can see we have a block of code that starts with nslayoutConstraint.activate. Now, what does this do? Well, this allows us to activate our constraints on our particular view. In this case, it's a UI label. We'll talk about UI labels in another video, but just know that it's a kind of view. And inside of this array of what we call constraints, we are configuring anchors. Now, anchors are important to constraints because that is how we pin. That's how we pin our views to one another. So right now we have the anchor on the constraint for the leading anchor pinned. Now, this is pinned to the view's leading anchor with spacing between where the anchor is and where the distance between both anchors, right, is 20 units. So between the leading anchor of the overall view, which is of our screen, and the UI label, there's 20 units. The same thing is for the trailing anchors. Between the trailing anchor of the screen and the trailing anchor of the label itself, there is 20 units. However, you might notice that with the trailing anchor, we're using a negative number instead of a positive number. And that's because of how the coordinate system in iOS works. So in iOS, the coordinate system works in such a way that 0, 0, x0, y0 is up in the top left-hand corner of the screen. So going towards 0, 0, also known as the trailing and bottom edges of your screen, when you configure constraints, those have to be negative numbers. Whereas going away from 0, 0, which would be the top anchor and the leading anchor, those have to be positive numbers. All right. And then here we have a height anchor set. And this height anchor helps us do exactly what it sounds like. This defines the height of the view. So we're constraining the height of the view to 44 units, which is about the size, which is about the height that a button should be in iOS for someone to be able to tap it with their finger easily. Now, again, you don't need to understand that part in particular about buttons, because we're going to talk about buttons in a later video, but just know that the smallest a view should be is 44 units high. And then we have a center Y anchor. Now, what does this do? Well, this tells auto layout where a view should be on the y-axis, so where it should be centered. In this case, we're setting the center Y anchor. We're centering the view vertically along the screen, right? So it's vertically centered on screen. Now, there are many other kinds of anchors. These are just a few of them. And if you don't fully understand this stuff now, that's fine. Throughout the series, we're going to be doing this a lot. So you'll get the hang of it eventually. But with all these things, the constraints, the coordinate system, anchors, all this stuff, this is what we use to create those adaptive layouts. And that's all auto layout really is. It's a system that allows us to create our user interfaces in an adaptable way for all screen sizes and for all device orientations. So it might seem complex at first, but you'll get used to it eventually, because we're going to be using this quite a lot. Now, that pretty much does it for this video on auto layout. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.